will, yes. Y'all want to sit out there? You will, please. Please.
You say please.
Minutes. Be interesting. Good morning. January 15th would have been Dr. King's 97th birthday had he still been with us. This speech is not an often heard speech that he delivered on August 31st, 1967 as the keynote address at the National Conference of Negro Politics in Chicago, Illinois. The title of it is The Three Evils of Society. You may have heard the statement, what would Jesus do, right? Well, have you ever heard the statement or the question, what would Dr. King say about the things that are going on in today's society? Well, he already said it in 1967. Mr. Chairman, friends and brothers, in this first gathering of the National Conference of Negro New Politics, ladies and gentlemen, seldom ever has it been such a diverse and truly ecumenical gathering convened under the aegis of politics in our nation. And I want to commend the leadership of the National Conference on New Politics for all the great work that they have done in making that significant convention possible. Indeed, by our very nature, we affirm that something new is taking place on the American political horizon. We've come here from the dusty plains of the Deep South and the depressing ghettos of the North. We have come from the great universities of the flourishing suburbs. We have come from Appalachian poverty and from conscience-stricken wealth. But we have come, and we have come here because we share a common concern for the moral health of our nation. We have come because our eyes have seen through the significant superficial glory and glitter of our society and observed the coming judgment. Like the prophet of old, we have read the handwriting on the wall. We have seen our nation weigh the balance of history and found warning. We have come because we see this as a dark hour in the affairs of men. For most of us, this is a new mood. We are traditionally the idealists. We are the marchers from Mississippi and Selma and Washington who staked our lives on the American dream during the first half of the decade. Many assembled here campaigned assiduously for Lyndon Johnson in 1964 because we could not stand by idly and watch our nation contaminated by the 18th century policies of Goldwaterism. We are the hardcore activists who were willing to believe that Southerners could be reconstructed to the constitutional image. We were the dreamers of a dream that dark yesterdays of man's inhumanity to man would soon be transformed into bright tomorrows of justice. Now it is hard to escape the disillusionment of betrayal. Our hopes have been blasted, and our dreams have been shattered. The promise of the great society was shipwrecked off the coast of Asia on the dreadful peninsula of Vietnam. The poor, black and white, are still perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. What happens to a dream deferred? It leads to bewildering frustration and corroding bitterness. I came to see this in a personal experience here in Chicago last summer. In all the speaking I have done in the United States before varied audiences, including some hostile whites, the only time I have ever been booed one night in our regularly meetings by some angry young men in our movement. In this situation, all the more ominous, in the view of rising expectations of men the world over, the deep rumblings that we hear today, the rumblings of discontent, is the thunder of disinherited masses rising from dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. All over the world, like a fever, freedom is spreading in the wildest liberation movement in history. The great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and lands. And in one majestic chorus, they are singing the words of our freedom song, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around." And so the collision course is set. The people cry for freedom, and the Congress attempts to legislate repression. Millions, yes, billions, are appropriated for mass murder, but the most meager pittance for foreign aid for international development is crushed in the surge of reaction. Unemployment rages at a major depression level in the black ghettos, but the bipartisan response is an anti-riot bill rather than a serious poverty program. The modest proposals for model cities, rent supplement, and rat control, pitiful as they were to begin with, get caught in the maze of congressional inaction. And I submit to you tonight that a Congress that proves to be more anti-Negro than anti-rat needs to be dismissed. It seems that our legislative assemblies have adopted a Nero patron as their patron saint and are bent on fiddling while our cities burn. Even when the people persist, and in the face of great obstacles, develop indigenous leadership and self-approaches to their problems, and finally treat the forest of bureaucracy to maintain existing government funds, and the correct political order seeks to crush even this beginning of hope. Yes, the hour is dark. Evil comes forth in the guise of good. It is a time of doubt talk, double talk, when men in high places have high blood pressure, of deceptive rhetoric, and an anemia of concrete performance. We cry out against welfare handouts to the poor, but generously approve an oil depletion allowance to make the rich richer. 6 Mississippi plantations receive more than $1 million a year not to plant cotton, but no provision is made to feed the tenant farmer who is put out of work by the government subsidy. I wish that I could say that this is just a passing phase in the cycles of our nation's life, certainly in times of war, times of reaction throughout the society. But I suspect that we are now experiencing the coming to the surface of a triple-pronged sickness that has been lurking within our body politic from the very beginning. This is the sickness of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism. Not only is this our nation's dilemma, it is the plague of Western civilization. And as early as 1906, W.E.B. Du Bois prophesied that the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line. Now, as we stand 2/3 into this crucial period of history, we know full well that racism is still that hound of hell which dogs the tracks of our civilization. Ever since the birth of our nation, white America has had a schizophrenic personality on the question of race. She has been torn between selves, a self which she profoundly professes, and the great principle of democracy, and a self in which she madly practices the antithesis of democracy. This tragic duality has produced a strange indecisiveness and ambivalence toward the Negro, causing America to take a step backwards simultaneously with every step forward on the question of racial justice. To be at once attracted to the Negro and repelled by him, to love him and to hate him. There has never been a solid, unified, and determined thrust to make justice a reality for African Americans. The step backward has a new name today. It is called the white backlash. But the white backlash is nothing new. It is the surfacing of old prejudices, hostilities, and ambivalences that have always been there. It was caused neither by the cry of black power nor the unfortunate recent wave of riots in our cities. The white backlash of today is rooted in the same problem that has characterized America ever since the black man landed in chains on the shores of this nation. This does not imply that all white Americans are racist. Far from the truth. Many white people have, through a deep moral compulsion, fought long and hard for social justice of the diseases of racism, or the dogma of racism has not been considerably modified in recent years. However, for the good of America, it is necessary to refute the idea that the dominant ideology in our country, even today, is freedom and equality. White racism is just an occasional departure from the norm on the part of a few bigoted extremists. Racism can well be that corrosive evil that will bring down the curtain on Western civilization. Arnold Toynbee has said that some 26 civilizations have risen upon the face of the earth. Almost all of them have descended into the junk heaps of destruction. The decline and fall of these civilizations, according to Toynbee, was not caused by external invasions, but by internal decay. They failed to respond creatively to the challenges impinging upon them. If America does not respond creatively to the challenge to banish racism, some future historian will have to say that a great civilization died because it lacked the soul and commitment to make justice a reality for all men. The second aspect of our afflicted society is extreme materialism. An Asian writer has portrayed our dilemma in candid terms. He says, you call your 1,000 material devices labor-saving machinery, yet you are forever busy. With the multiplying of your machinery, you grow increasingly fatigued, anxious, nervous, and dissatisfied. Whatever you have, you want more, and wherever you are, you want to go somewhere else. Your devices are neither time-saving nor soul-saving machinery. There are so many sharp spurs which urge you on to invent more machinery, and to do more business. This tells us something about our civilization that cannot be cast aside as a prejudiced charge by an Eastern thinker who is jealous of Western prosperity. We cannot escape the indictment. This does not mean that we must turn back the clock of scientific progress. No one can overlook the wonders that science has wrought in our lives. The automobile will not abdicate in favor of the horse and buggy, or the train in favor of the stagecoach, or the tractor in favor of the hand plow, or the scientific method in favor of ignorance and superstition. But the moral lag must be redeemed when scientific power outruns moral power. We stand up with guided missiles and misguided men. When we foolishly maximize the minimum and minimize the maximum, we sign a warrant for our own decay of doom. This is the moral lag in our thing-oriented society that binds us to the human realities around us and encourages us in the greed and exploitation which creates this sector of poverty in the midst of wealth. Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both black and white, both here and abroad. If Negroes and poor whites do not participate in the free flow of wealth within our economy, they will forever be poor, giving their energy, their talents, and their limited funds to the consumer market, but reaping few benefits and services in return. The way to end poverty is to end the exploitation of the poor, ensure them a fair share in the government services and the nation's resources. The tragedy is our materialistic culture does not possess the statesmanship necessary to do it. Victor Hugo could have been thinking of 20th century when he wrote, "There's always more misery among the lower classes than there is humanity in the higher classes." The time has come for America to face the inevitable choice between materialism and humanism. We must devote at least as much of our children's education to the health and wealth of the poor as we do to the care of our automobiles and building of beautiful, impressive hotels. And we must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. We must further recognize that the ghetto is a domestic colony. Black people must develop programs that will aid in the transfer of power and wealth into the hands of residents of the ghetto so that they may, in reality, control their own destinies. This is the meaning of new politics. People of goodwill in the larger community must support the black man in this effort. The final phase of our national sickness is a disease of militarism. Nothing more clearly demonstrates our nation's abuse of military power than our tragic adventure in Vietnam. This war has played havoc with the destiny of the entire world. It has torn up the Geneva Agreement. It has seriously impaired the United Nations. It has exacerbated the hatred between continents, and worse still, between races. It has frustrated our development at home, telling our own underprivileged children that we place insatiable military demands above their most critical needs. It has greatly contributed to the forces of reaction in America and strengthened the military-industrial complex. It has practically destroyed Vietnam and left thousands of American and Vietnamese youth maimed and mutilated, and exposed the whole world to the risk of nuclear warfare. Above all, the war in Vietnam has revealed what Senator Fulbright calls our nation's arrogance of power. We are arrogant in professing to be concerned about the freedom of foreign nations while not setting our own house in order. Many of our senators and congressmen vote joyously to appropriate billions of dollars for the war in Vietnam. And many of these same senators and congressmen vote loudly against a fair housing bill to make it possible for a Negro veteran of Vietnam to purchase a decent home. We arm Negro soldiers to kill on foreign battlefields, but offer little protection to their relatives from beatings and killings in our own South. We are willing to make the Negro 100% a citizen of warfare, but reduce him to 50% of a citizen on American soil. No war in our nation's history has ever been so volatile of our conscience, our national interest, and so destructive of our moral standing before the world. No enemy has ever been able to cause such damage to us as we inflict upon ourselves. The inexorable decay of our human urban centers has flared into terrifying domestic conflict as the pursuit of foreign war absorbs our wealth and energy. Squalor and poverty scar our cities as our military might destroy cities in a far-off land to support oligarchy, to intervene in domestic conflict. The president who cherishes consensus for peace has intensified the war in an answer to cry to stop the war. It is brought tauntingly to one's 1 minute's flying time from China, to a moment before the midnight of world conflagration. And we are offered a tax for war instead of a plan for peace. Men of reason should no longer debate the merits of war or the means of financing war. They should end the war and restore sanity and humanity to the American policy. And if the will of the people continues to be unheeded, all men of goodwill must create a situation in which the 1967-68 elections are made a referendum on war. The American people must have an opportunity to vote into oblivion those who cannot detach themselves from militarism and those who lead us. So we are here because we believe, we hope, we pray that something new might emerge in the political life of this nation, which will produce a new man, new structures and institutions, and a new life for mankind. I am convinced that this new life will not emerge until our nation undergoes a radical revolution of changes and values. When machines and computers profit from motives and property rights are considered more than people, the giant triplets of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. Civilization that can flounder as easily in the face of moral bankruptcy as it can through financial bankruptcy. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. And we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside. But that will only be on initial act. One day the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be beaten and robbed as they make their journey through life. True compassion is more than flinging the corn to a beggar. It understands that an edifice which produces a beggar needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth with righteous indignation. It will look at thousands of working people displaced from their jobs with reduced incomes as a result of automation, while the profits of employers remain intact, and say, this is not just. It will look across the ocean and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia and Africa, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries, and say, this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say, this is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's home with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift. Approaching spirit, our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal opposition to poverty, racism, and militarism. And with this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo and unjust mores, and thereby speed the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked places shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. May I say in conclusion that there is a need now, more than ever before, for men and women in our nation to be creatively maladjusted. Mr. Davis said, and I say to you that I choose to be among the maladjusted. As my good friend Bill Coffin said, there are those who have criticized me and many of you for taking a stand against the war in Vietnam and for seeking to say to the nation that the issues of civil rights cannot be separated from the issues of peace. I want to say to you tonight that I intend to keep these issues mixed, because they are mixed. And somewhere we see that injustice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have fought too long and too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up at this point in my life segregating my moral concerns. And so let us stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And on some positions, it is necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because it is right. And we say to our nation tonight, we say to our government, we even say to our FBI, we will not be harassed. We will not make a butchery of our conscience. We will not be intimidated. And we will be heard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have to say one thing in conclusion, is that of what was said and what you heard and captured, I want you to think about at least one thing. There may be more, but at least one thing of what was said by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in 1967 that we are experiencing in 2026. And I also encourage you to listen to Dr. King. It is on YouTube. Listen to him. Listen to his words. This is my representation of his words, but listen to him express it. Listen to him express it. Thank you again for staying a little extra.